St. Lucie Public Schools, with the assistance of the Roundtable of St. Lucie County, is a Kids at Hope district where we believe that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. Hello, and welcome to The Power of Hope. The Power of Hope is a show dedicated at discussing Kids at Hope in St. Lucie County. Kids at Hope is an international initiative that has been brought to the area by the Roundtable of St. Lucie County and funded by the United Way, the Children's Services Council of St. Lucie County, and the Roy A. Hunt Foundation. Kids at Hope is not a program. It is a strategic cultural framework based on three basic principles and beliefs. We believe, we connect, and we time travel. I am treasure hunter Jarrett Stevens, Kids at Hope School Community Liaison, as well as your host for your show, and I would like to thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Power of Hope. We encourage you to join into every episode this season as we discuss building a culture of hope to ensure that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. Now, you may be asking yourself, why did he refer to himself as a treasure hunter? Well, as an adult and a treasure hunter, I am committed to search for all the talents, skills, and intelligence that exist in all children and youth. I believe that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. Now, Kids at Hope has three universal truths, with universal truth number 3 being we time travel. Children succeed when they are able to articulate their future. We are fortunate to have with us today a man that I know believes in children and has come up with a creative way to help them mental time travel. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Emdin.
Oh, man, what an amazing introduction, sir. That's amazing.
Dr. Emdin, thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Power of Hope.
Absolute pleasure to be here with you, sir.
Today we will be discussing building a culture of hope. All right, so Doc, now you are from New York City.
I am.
Are you born and raised in New York?
Actually, no, man. So I'm usually known as the New Yorker guy, you know, the New York hip-hop guy. But I was born in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time in my youth actually outside of the United States. My dad is Nigerian.
Okay.
So spent a couple years in Nigeria. And then my preteen and teen years I spent in Brooklyn, New York, and moved when I was probably about 16 or 17 to the Bronx in New York, and I've been there ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
They haven't let you go.
No, well, I haven't let them go either.
Okay.
You know, it's a mutual process
okay.
here.
It's a beautiful relationship you formed with the city.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you are a very educated man.
Thank you.
What is your highest level of education you've obtained, and what educational institutions have you studied at?
That's a fascinating question. When folks usually ask about your education or describe you as educated, the initial perception is that you're going to have a conversation about the degrees that they hold. I do perceive myself to be an educated man, but not because of the degrees I hold, but because of the fact that I'm always in a quest for knowledge, a quest for making sense of the world in more interesting ways. And so the degrees don't have anything to do with that.
Okay.
But to have a conversation about the degrees, I hold 3 bachelor's degrees, actually, in physical anthropology, biology, and chemistry. I'm a scientist by training. I hold a master's degree in education administration. I also hold a master's degree in natural sciences, then a PhD in urban education with a specialization in mathematics, science, and technology. But again, those are degrees I hold. Correct. But not necessarily indicators of how educated I am.
And I understand where you're going with that, and we'll make sure that our crowd understands that by the end of the show.
Good.
Now, with the degrees that you do hold, what educational institutions have you attended?
So my undergraduate degree is from the City University of New York, specifically Lehman College in the Bronx. So I went to a local school. I started there. My master's degree in natural sciences is from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, one of the premier science and engineering schools in this country. So shout out to RPI. If there are any RPI alums watching, I give you props everywhere I go. And my doctoral degree is from the City University of New York as well, the Graduate Center. So I spent most of my schooling in and around New York City. I went for my master's upstate New York, but always circled back. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so now with all of the paper documentation that you have,
yes, sir,
giving your education relevance from an educational standpoint, what do you currently do as far as work?
So currently I'm a professor of science education at Teachers College at Columbia University. This year I'm on sabbatical from Teachers College. I just got tenure, so I'm celebrating that.
Congratulations.
And thank you, sir. And in my tenure year, I'm a fellow at Harvard University at the W.B. Du Bois Institute. So I have 2 fellowships there. One is a Caperton Fellow, and one, interestingly enough, is a Hip Hop Archive Fellow. So fellow at Harvard, professor at Columbia, and at Columbia at Teachers College, I direct the Center for Health Equity and Urban Science Education with a very amazing colleague, Dr. Barbara Wallace. And our work there revolves around health, equity, education, and underpinning all of that with science. How scientific literacy, helps you to know more about your health and know more about education.
Okay, so now with all of that being said,
yes, sir.
Someone may look at you and may not see Columbia, may not see Harvard, may not see all the places you've just named or the degrees that you've obtained,
right?
Or even by looking by your appearance or by your age. May I ask how old you are?
Yeah. So I'm 35 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
35 years old.
Yes, sir.
And you've accomplished many things so far in your life.
I've been blessed to be able to do so. Yes.
Okay, so now being on sabbatical, that's giving you an opportunity to travel around, giving you a little more freedom, doesn't lock you in.
Yeah.
I understand prior to actually coming here with us in St. Lucie County, you were in California.
I was.
And it was a quick turnaround.
Well, my life in this last year has been crazy. So one, I'm traveling between Cambridge, Boston, and New York to go from Harvard to Columbia. But I've also had a bunch of research projects that I've been working on sort of grow. And that's brought me to places like here and in Stanford recently. So I was in Stanford giving a talk with my partner in the Science Genius Project, Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting partnership. And so Jizza and I were at Stanford just talking about Science Genius, talking about hip-hop and science. I've been able to get to Washington, D.C., where I recently got an award.
Congratulations.
From the White House for my work in STEM education. I've been able to go and do some work in Jamaica recently, again, revolving this work in science education. So this year has given me the space to really grow and plant seeds for my approach to education in different spaces.
Okay, so with your approach to education, hip-hop education, before we actually touch on that, I want to just give you an opportunity to talk to our youth. You're very well-traveled, and your education has given you the opportunity to be well-traveled.
Absolutely.
When people are involved in different things in life, many youth, many people in general want to do a lot of traveling, but they don't have the means to do that. Whereas just using you as an example in your experience, you've actually used education. Education hasn't used you.
Absolutely.
You've used education and the knowledge that you have to travel all around the world.
Absolutely. I mean, so I'm going to not look at you for a second.
Okay.
And I'm going to look at the camera.
Please do. Talk to the crowd.
So if there are young people who are watching, one thing that I found about education, so when we talked about education earlier and I said my degrees weren't the education, I think the chief way to get an education is to travel. Once you leave the confines of the neighborhoods that you've been embedded in, and you see the world in a different way, you see different people who think about things differently, who speak differently, then you ask them questions, that's when you get a true education. And then the value of the paper degrees start making sense. And then through my work as a professor, part of my work is for folks to ask me to come to spaces to talk, or for my institution to ask me to go to places to do research. And so, I've been able to, because of my research and my work, travel. Not necessarily because I've wanted to, but I've realized through the travel that have come out of my work that I get much more of an education through that means. So, once you get those degrees, y'all, and, you got that paper behind your name, those degrees or those letters behind your name, it opens up the opportunity for you to see the world. And so, that's one of the benefits of education that people don't really tell you about, but is inherent in there. Yeah.
So with that being said, the great Whitney Houston once said, "I believe our children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way."
Yep. Every graduation song for like 10 years after that song came out.
So with that being said, and I believe in that as well. Our children are our future, and whatever happens with our children will dictate our future, because sooner or later they will be the ones that are actually leading our society worldwide.
Absolutely.
The creative way that I spoke about in our introduction about how you've helped the children mentally time travel where they want to go. To give you a better understanding, mental time travel is the ability to look into your future, figure out where you want to be, return to the present, and come up with steps or a plan in order to get there.
I love it.
So with our younger generation coming up now, I would like for you to talk about hip-hop ed and where you got that idea from.
Yeah, so hip-hop ed, hashtag hip-hop ed on Twitter. Hip-hop ed is a larger philosophical movement that has practical implications.
Okay.
And it's an approach to teaching and learning that focuses on the power and the potential of hip-hop music and hip-hop culture. It is like an approach that says just because somebody is from the hip-hop generation or consumes hip-hop music or comes from communities that are described within hip-hop music does not mean that they're outside of the realms of being able to be academic and be able to be intellectual. And so the movement is essentially anything you can do to get young people to realize that being hip-hop necessarily means being academic.
Okay.
And that's a larger movement than underneath the umbrella of hip-hop ed and hashtag hip-hop ed are a variation of projects that include Science Genius, that includes my partner Jocelyn Wilson's work on the 4/4 Beat Project, an amazing colleague, Emil Cook, and Jasiri X, and the One Hood Project in Pittsburgh. So there are a bunch of different projects under the umbrella of this shared philosophy of hip-hop ed.
Okay, and when I think of hip-hop, I grew up in the hip-hop generation.
Of course.
And when I think of hip-hop, one way that I like to describe it to our youth is having intelligence positively helps opportunities progress.
I love that.
So in hip-hop, there is education and there's entertainment. So that's a way to catch the attention of our youth.
Right.
So once you get their attention, you can actually get them to learn.
Absolutely.
And realize that they are science geniuses.
Absolutely.
Okay, so speaking about the youth, what is your perception on the pressure society puts on our youth in regards to their identity?
I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, so we talk about hip-hop, and why I use hip-hop is because I also realize that hip-hop has become the chief tool through which negative perceptions of self get perpetuated.
Okay.
So I don't view hip-hop in this sort of glossy, put my rose-colored glasses on and saying hip-hop is all beautiful. There are aspects of the culture that I critique and that I have issues with, but I feel like the same tool that has been used to send youth on this negative path has to be the only tool through which you can introduce them to a positive path. And so the pressures are high. You're listening to music, you're inundated with media, teachers' perceptions of you, society's perceptions of you, and oftentimes all those perceptions are negative. And what happens if everybody's viewing you a certain way, and collectively it's viewing you as not academic or not intellectual, before long you start to believe it yourself. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that pressure is hard and it's intense. And, but the thing is with pressure can either be the thing that allows you to break, or it can be the thing that allows to be a motivator, that strengthens you.
Right.
And so what I tell young people is this, once you develop their self-awareness, you say this pressure that people have put on you, you have to be able to prove them wrong.
Right. Now, with the pressure you're speaking on now, you're talking in terms of adults looking at children.
Indeed.
Or in youth. But what about the pressures that the youth put on themselves?
Well, you see, the pressure the youth put on themselves are actually a reflection of the pressures that adults put on them.
Okay.
So what happens is that if, let's say, a larger, more media narrative about their inadequacies gets presented by the media and adults and corporations and companies and is sold to young people, then young people believe that. If a young person believes that and they have some power within another community of young people, then a person with less power in that community looks at another child. But inevitably, you can't blame the young people for the pressures they put on each other because they're a reflection of what societally we place on them. So the idea is to understand that a young person on their own does not construct a negative image of their self to sell back to their peer.
Right.
They're just ingesting what the world gives to them. And so what we have to be able to do is recreate the possibilities for the young people so they see that they're able to see through the messages that have been put on them. I hate the game of when we blame young people because a 12 or 13 or 11-year-old or even a 15-year-old developmentally has not yet tried on enough identities to be able to pick one. So we know adolescence is the time you try on identities.
Correct.
Folks from other communities. So, 1 week I want to be a bad boy. The next week I want to be a witch. The next week I want to be a time traveler. The next week I want to be an astrologist. The next week I want to be an optician. Youth who aren't inundated with negative images get a chance to try on different identities. Youth from urban communities oftentimes, particularly youth of color, are only inundated with certain realities.
Correct.
So they're only trying on the identity that's around them all the time. If they're exposed to more identities, then they try on different ones, and then all of a sudden, their realities change.
Right.
So identities are a reflection of reality. You change the realities, then it has an impact on the identity.
And I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And that was very well said. Now, with the event that we're hosting, the Kids at Hope STEM Rap Battles.
Did you see the smile on my face?
I see it. I see it. The idea originated from a program that you did in New York.
Yes.
And it's a great thing. The youth from around the school district have gotten excited about it. They've been preparing. They've been rehearsing.
I love it.
And the cool part about it is that they're rapping and dancing about science, technology, engineering, or math.
Absolutely.
I've been going around, have the privilege of to go around and watch the schools as they get prepared. And I must say that I have been so impressed and so overwhelmed. I understand how smart and talented and capable of success our students are with the Kids at Hope philosophy, but to actually go and hear the students rapping about science, technology, engineering, and math, yeah. I'm hearing them say things in their songs that I have no clue what they're talking about. I had to ask a couple of the groups, okay, that's great, but what does that mean?
Wow.
And then I actually went back and looked it up myself, and they were correct. And so they're actually educating me, so they're having the opportunity tonight not only to put their talents and skills on display for the community, as well as giving back to the community, because admittance to our show is 2 cans of food.
I love that idea. Yeah.
So not only are they having that opportunity to display their talents, but they're learning the importance of giving back to the community.
Yes.
And the cans are being received by an organization called Grace Packs. And what Grace Packs is, it's an organization that it's in many of our schools, and we have 27% of the students in St. Lucie County are food insufficient, meaning they don't know where their next meal is coming from when they leave outside of school. So what Grace Packs does is they send these students, these identified students, home every single weekend with a pack of food.
Wow.
Every single weekend. And they plan to continue doing that throughout the course of the summer.
Wow.
So that's another benefit of the show tonight. But with all that being said, what gave you the idea? I know the hip-hop ed and hip-hop education is your soul. What gave you the idea to have the students actually rap and connect that with the whole STEM idea?
I mean, I can't answer that question without first saying how much my heart was full this morning hearing the excitement of the young people about the event tonight and about science and about technology and about engineering and mathematics. I think, and the reason why it's so heartwarming is because you know that those are the classes that they traditionally do the worst in. And just to hear their enthusiasm and to hear what you're saying they were doing.
Yes.
That is why I do this work. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And the idea itself came out of me being a teacher. So with all the degrees and whatever else it is, my heart and soul is in education, and it's in the classroom. I always tell people I write my best papers today going into the back of a classroom. There's something about the energy of being in there. And so it came as me being a teacher.
Okay.
I'm teaching. I'm trying to get the point across. I was teaching intro physics. You know, I'm describing the concepts. I think I'm doing a great job. I'm looking at the classroom and the students, and they're disinterested. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then I'm walking home, and I see them on the street corners rapping, and they're smiling, they're laughing, they're engaged, they're listening to each other, they're giving each other feedback. And I said, I want that kind of emotion in my class.
Okay.
So I really started just studying hip-hop. I started studying the culture, the music. I already listened to the music anyway. What is it about that space that I can bring into the classroom? And so it became first starting off by bringing in instrumentals in the classroom. So kids just heard the music and they loved it. And I said, oh my gosh, this is working. Then it came with me rapping, and they responded to me trying to rap. And then I said, well, the point is to give them power, so have them rap.
Right.
And so they were rapping. And all of a sudden, I stumbled upon this thing by accident that was giving me amazing results. The kids were scoring higher on their tests. They were showing us up to school more often. And so as I got more, went up in my education, and I got a chance to sort of go into institutions of higher ed, that just became my research. And then I happened to meet this amazing man, Jizza. And, I kind of just described the project, and he right away said, I want to be a part of that. And together, we just said, well, let's make this go to as many places as possible. And the only way it can go to as many places as possible is if you make it visible.
Correct.
And so we had the first event. It got a lot of media and press coverage. We talked about the successes of it. And folks said, you know what, I can try this in my community because my community looks like your community. The kids aren't doing well here either. And it came from me in the classroom, grew into a partnership with Jizza, and now it's become, what we're seeing today.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of what we saw today, this morning we had a great event.
Amazing.
The title of the event this morning, as you know, was Mental Time Travel Through Hip-Hop Education.
Yes, sir.
Mental Time Travel Through Hip-Hop Education, getting our students educated and entertained at the same exact time.
Yep.
We had 1,100 students in this beautiful theater that we're sitting in now.
Yep.
And it was a powerful thing to be up here on stage with yourself and to be looking into the crowd. How did you feel? What is your reflection on this morning's event?
I mean, I got goosebumps, man. I mean, when you hear 1,100 students yelling at you, I'm a scientist. When you know research-wise that the more they say that I am a scientist, I am countering every time that they've said in the past, I can't do science, it's too hard. And so to hear them all saying those words with pride, with vigor, with enthusiasm, it's magical. And you know that once they say those words and they encounter the science class, they'll remember that moment where them and their peers said that they can do it. And so I know that this has become, you know, it's a seed that's been planted.
Yes.
And of course it has to be watered. That's why the folks in St. Lucie are going to keep pushing this idea and they're going to keep watering those seeds. But I know for a fact the seed was planted today.
Yes.
And so now it's up to us as a community to be able to water those seeds to make it grow.
Right.
Yeah.
And I agree with you totally.
Yeah.
Science Genius.
Yes.
That is something else that you came up with.
Yeah.
What exactly is Science Genius?
So Science Genius is the process of engaging in not just the raps, but a rap competition.
Okay.
And that's the piece that JISA partnered with. So we have kids who are in different schools within a specific community. The kids are charged with writing a rap about something that they've learned in school already.
Okay.
That's in science or in the STEM fields. They work on those raps over time. They try to perfect them. Within each of the schools, the kids have a competition with each other to see who will represent the school. And then we have a final event at the end where all the competitors come together, all the classes in the schools come together, they get on stage, they perform, and then we pick the one winner.
Okay.
And then we tell the kids, all of you are winners, but this one person is exceptional.
Right.
And then the products that are created by those young people, we utilize in the next year to actually use as teaching tools in the classroom. Because we know teachers can teach, but nothing can teach more than music.
Correct.
And nothing can teach more than information that's been generated by other young people.
Right.
So we're creating these teaching tools as well as creating a nice, fun environment surrounding STEM.
Now, in your speech this morning, you were talking about an experiment that was done at one of your institutions.
Yeah.
And you can correct me on which institution it was, so
Sure.
I'm not even going to say which one it was.
Okay.
But where rappers were studied.
Yeah.
And you identified a tool that was used.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell that story to the viewers?
So the research was actually done by the National Institutes of Health.
Okay.
And the research project involved the scientists going into communities and identifying freestyle rappers.
Okay. What is freestyle for our viewers that might
I'm
not
sorry.
know?
So freestyle rappers are rappers who literally they make up their raps almost on the spot, almost impromptu.
Okay.
And elements of the raps are pre-written and elements are impromptu based on the audience.
Okay.
Or based on the crowd or based on the environment.
Right.
So they took these rappers and brought them to the lab, and a couple of discoveries came out. The first discovery actually is fascinating, beyond the fMRIs. They had the rappers rap, and the first discovery was, wow, these guys have a very, 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 very
Let me interject.
huge vocabulary.
You said the name of the tool was what?
The fMRI.
And what is that?
So it's the frequency magnetic resonance instruments.
Okay, and
Yeah.
those are connected to the brain.
Connected to the brain.
Can you explain, like you did this morning, the parts of the brain? And,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I want give them all of that.
I'll give you all of it. So,
Okay.
so the first discovery was they found out these guys knew a lot of words.
Okay.
Then we hooked up the fMRIs to the brains of the freestyle rappers, and different parts of the brains get activated based on different stimuli
Okay.
or based on different processes that an individual is engaged in.
Okay.
So there's a part of the brain that's the medial prefrontal cortex. The medial prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that controls attentiveness, paying attention, essentially all the skills that are related to learning
Okay.
are controlled by the medial prefrontal cortex. So as they attached the fMRIs to these rappers' brains and they had them engage in a freestyle rap, they found that the medial prefrontal cortex was firing
Okay.
in ways that they hadn't noticed before, essentially then saying that as they're engaged in this process, this impromptu rap creation process, of course there's nothing as a true freestyle because part of it involves stuff that you've learned before, but in that process, the part of the brain that controls their learning essentially
Okay.
is working in an optimal way when they're engaging in the creation of these raps.
Okay.
This is fascinating. And then concurrently, there have been projects that have been done focusing on the memorization of information within confined spaces that shows that the dorsolateral region of the brain, which controls appropriateness of behavior, acts in a way that's not optimal in those sort of boring, closed school spaces. So essentially the conclusion that can be drawn from both of these experiments is that if you're engaged in processes that replicate the hip-hop freestyle rap process, the kids will learn better because parts of the brain that activate learning are working. And in a traditional, boring science classroom, the parts of the brain that control appropriateness and behavior are not working. So kids are more likely to act up. I didn't talk about this morning, but let's take that a little bit further.
Okay.
If you talk about the populations who are most likely to engage in freestyle rap,
Okay.
they're usually youth of color.
Correct.
They're usually boys.
Correct.
If you look at the population in classrooms that are most likely to not have appropriate behavior,
Okay.
the increased suspension rates, increased attention rates, they're also youth of color boys.
Correct.
Therefore, the argument I'm making here is that the structure of the traditional classroom for that population actually creates the circumstances neuroscientifically that doesn't have them to act appropriately within schools.
Correct.
And that if the structure of the schools were more malleable and allowed for a more hip-hop-based approach to teaching and learning, then the parts of the brain that are activated for learning would actually be activated in the classroom. And so, there are interesting conclusions that we can draw from these experiments about what we do in schools, about who does well in schools and who does not, and about who could do well in school if the structures were different, okay. if the instruction was different.
Right. So when you say if the instruction was different,
yeah.
a lot of students, like ones you've described, don't do well with just the lecture type delivery.
Of course.
So what you're saying is if the teachers will go about making learning more exciting or more creative, or get the students involved more, give them a rhythm to learn to. It's not about the information that they're learning is not valuable. It's about our teachers across the world need to accept the culture of our students, the culture of the students that they're teaching, whatever culture that may be,
absolutely,
and put them in the best situation to be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, let me extend this even further, because I think sometimes when I make the argument about the young men of color, then people say, well, it's just for them. This approach to teaching and learning is actually best for all young people across backgrounds. So there may be some students who are successful in traditional classrooms. They also benefit from a more robust approach to teaching and learning. We're also saying, though, that if you use this other approach, the kids who are not doing well are most likely to be successful. So it's best practice for everyone, but you also have to focus on the needs of those who are least likely to be successful within a traditional structure.
Right. So it's helping those that aren't succeeding, and it's strengthening those that are already succeeding.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time.
Okay.
I know we could sit here and
talk
about
man.
it all day.
We could be here all day long.
In this beautiful environment that we got set up.
Indeed.
Do you have any closing remarks that you would like to leave with the community as far as anything you would like to speak on?
I mean,
the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. I think the first thing I want to say is just by virtue of meeting a few students this morning, it's very, very obvious that these kids want to do the right thing. When we spoke about anti-violence, they clapped. When we talked about being a scientist and an engineer, they cheered. When we told them to say, I'm a scientist, they screamed. What that indicates is that within this community, there is a want and desire to do well, and there's also the ability to do well. So the issue now is not about where the kids are. The issue is about what we're going to do as a community to ensure that the brilliance that they're expressing, that they're dying to pour out, gets watered, gets grown, gets cultivated. And so that means that it's a collective community responsibility to ensure that the brilliance of the young people express themselves. And if it does not become expressed, and this is the key piece, if it does not become expressed, we cannot hold them responsible, because they've showed us today that they are ready and they want it. And if they don't have an opportunity to express it, it's not their fault, it's ours.
And that was a great way to end it. The power of hope, as you all know, we like to come and talk about building a culture of hope, and that's exactly what you just said. We actually have to build the culture of hope to support the success of our children.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you, sir.
Sir,
for
absolute
joining me
pleasure.
on
Absolute
today's
pleasure.
show.
Yeah.
I would also like to thank our viewers for tuning in. And remember, hope keeps motivation alive longer than anything else. I am your host, Jarrett Stevens. Thank you for joining us. Have a blessed day.